Start a small business. No need to work 40, 50 hours a week, slaving your life away. Obtain financial freedom, be your own boss, and create your own destiny. Moguls are the new superstars. The path to country club membership and a leased Mercedes-Benz is paved in gold as you take your business trips to Orlando or Vegas. Validation from your in-laws is just an LLC and Facebook business page away. At least, that's what they tell you anyways. Through social media, websites, and targeted ads, you're sold an image. Small business owners seem to walk on water. You'd think you're the last person on earth working a regular job with a regular boss. But there's trouble in paradise, and its name is in over your head. People start looking to start their own business, don't know what they don't know. But that's why we started our Small Business Confidential podcast, to share what we've learned from years of experience. There's not a lot of people in on this, so remember, dear podcast listeners, you heard it here first, off the record, on the QT, and very hush-hush.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Riley for the Cleveland Real Estate Investor and also our companion podcast, Small Business Confidential. We're going to be talking with my team here, Amari and Brooke. How you guys doing?
Good. Happy Friday.
Yep. Happy Friday. Happy Easter.
Oh, yeah, the Easter bunny.
Yep.
Coming.
Happy Good Friday.
Yeah, happy Good Friday. So, yeah, well, most of the crews, subs, whatever, knock on wood, everybody's punched out. So, middle of the day, noon on Friday, 1:00. And so I just got done having half the company over to my house for a major cleanup, mulching, paint work, washed windows. So it's a combination of spring cleaning, lawn cut, feed the koi pond. So it was pretty busy, but so it's still fresh in my mind, especially after our virtual online schedule board meeting with all the top people, which we have Fridays late morning. I thought, let's talk about managing people. Managing, if you have a sub, plumber, or contractor at your real estate, if you're dealing with subs in your business, what are some general tips? I'm not going to give you the top 10, number 1 to number 10, because they're all kind of co-equal. So we're going to start going around the horn, just general thoughts on managing people. Let's start out with you, Brooke.
Oh, I've got just a bunch. I don't know why, for some reason, this came into my mind. I'm not saying it's the most important thing, but it was the first thing I thought of is, you're there to be their manager, not their friend. You want to be friendly, but not, a dick. So you kind of have to find that kind of middle of the road where, you're being respectful, but, at the end of the day, you're in charge of managing their work. Took me a long time. I mean, I'm still trying to figure it out, but, just how to navigate that. And, on top of that too, I mean, I think we all have our own, stuff that we bring to the table. Me being, I'm the boss's son, so I'm fully aware of that. I think Amari, if I had to guess, yours would be, you're on the younger side, but it doesn't mean that, you're not capable. So you're always kind of, at least for me, I'm a little hyper aware of that. And it kind of makes me want to work, not necessarily work harder, but work smarter. So I don't know. Those are kind of the first things.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to jump ahead of you, Amari, and I'll kick it back to you. I think the title, in fact, I want the title of this podcast to be, it's not personal, it's business. And that's really what it is. You're going to treat people with respect, but hey, this is my business. This is my house. This is how I want it done. And the less said, the better. That's got to be underlying everything that you do when you are managing people. You are in charge. You're open to listen. You're open to their questions, but it's a business. They want to get paid every week or every 2 weeks. If they're a sub, they want to get paid when the invoice comes in. They don't want to wait 30 days. Like, Trump would just screw these people left and right. That's why he was a, quote, successful businessman. He had 20,000 lawsuits and just dragged them out and didn't pay them. Contractors can be like that, especially if you own real estate. You're a landlord. You're waiting for the check. You're over leveraged. You're not real liquid. Sometimes the subs have to wait. Well, guess what? If they got to wait, guess who's going to wait if suddenly you need an emergency? So I'm kind of free associating, but at the end of the day, this is a business. So back to you, Amari, for your initial thoughts.
Well, kind of touching on what Brooke was saying, that's one thing that, I've had to learn and definitely am still learning is, in terms of, you wanting to be respectful, want to have a pleasant environment to work in, but you definitely don't want to be the friend, the homie, whatever. One of the things that kind of, as a manager, got me into, I don't want to say trouble, but just kind of pointless conversations and wasting time is over explaining why someone needs to do something or why they should, change their thinking about something or whatever. It gets to be a point where it's just wasting time. It's going in one ear and out the other. They've got my mom likes to say, certain people have a reason for every season. A reason why, oh, I don't want to do that because of this, or, oh, I like to do it this way. Or it's just, you're going to do it the way that I'm telling you to do it right now. And that's
exactly. Yeah.
And I think
I had this, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, maybe it's like after, okay, they've, it's been a few weeks, it's been this, it's like, and once they just do it, after you tell them just do it and they just start doing it, they usually realize it themselves and they're the ones who bring it up. But that's all inconsequential. It's just no over explaining. But what were you going to say, Brooke?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough. The other job I had was working at a summer camp, which, I think Mike would agree for me it was like a second home. I had a great boss there, and he's used to dealing with staff who are teenagers in college, so he, like, looking back on it now, his management style, he was just so spot on. But I remember this one time, Mari, you talked about not over explaining. I remember this one time I came into his office at night, and, I had the ability as a senior staff to go into town if I asked his permission. And I remember I was going into town every night, and I went in and I said, hey, I'd like to go into town. Is that okay? And he said, oh, I'll give you the short answer, no. And I said, well, why not? And I said, I'll give you the long answer, hell no. And it was just so like drop the mic, like the gavel hit the table. I was like, okay. And he's like, go to bed. And I was like, so like, I think you're so spot on, Amari. You don't need to over explain. And sometimes to kind of, I don't want to say like insert your authority, but a good response if they say, well, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to check in with you after lunch? The answer is because I said so. Exactly. You don't need to explain the importance of checking in after lunch or the importance of using a drop cloth. The answer is because I'm telling you to do that. And the good employees, A, probably aren't going to ask you that. And B, when you say that, they'll go, yep, you're right. Okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And right away, you're already weeding out the people you don't want to be in your organization. I mean, better cut, why drag this thing out for months? We've had that problem. We've had this problem with, some, the Lucas and the Ashleys and, stuff. It's like that scene in Moneyball, bullet to the head versus, couple in the leg. Just get to the point. Just do it. If you got a problem with it, you got to leave. That's what it is. And notice how I'm not yelling. because if you start yelling at it, you've already lost control.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, think of Michael Corleone. Think of, the only time I ever saw the Godfather mad was when he was talking to his godson, the Frank Sinatra character. You could act like a man, That's the only time I saw him mad. Everything else was, and then of course his son picks it up, he's talking to Luca Brasi. That's a great managing scene. He's saying to Luca Brasi sits down, the foreboding music in the background. He says, I'd like you to go to the Italians. You tell them you're not happy here. Find out what's, I'm a little concerned about the Salazzo guy, find out. And Luca just gets up and goes. He's not like, why do you want me to do that? Hey, he's even seen Luca saying stuff like,
Why do you want me to do that?
you know what? Yeah, it's made some plans, I don't know, Godfather. No. Godfather's telling him what to do, and he's fucking doing it. That's what it is. Or a quarterback in a huddle. He's calling the play. Don't argue with him. So I think and then you also think about, Brooke. Hey, Brooke's my son. He grew up. So, we're not going to get into how I parented him, but I know one thing I learned from my dad was, what you were talking about with Falcon Camp, your camp experiences. Kids would ask me, well, why am I doing this? Because I said so. There's no explanation here, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm paying the mortgage. What am I going to explain to them? And you think about the era we live in now. I'm not explaining to my kids. All right. I'm not explaining why it's important that you, do X, Y, and Z. You know what? They're 10 years old, right? They're 13. You think they give a shit about the reasons? They're just trying to get out of doing the work. So, and that's the other thing. The biggest complaint, all of you out there listening, you know what the biggest complaint is? I just can't find good people. That's the biggest single complaint. No, you can't find good people because you don't know how to manage anybody. I'll take some guy and he's either going to get better or he's going to get lost. Right.
Right.
Remember when we had, I was coaching Brooks' baseball team with this one kid had a lot of talent. Martin would start talking back to me, take a lap. He'd say, hey, coach, why don't you take a lap? Take another lap, Martin. You could, and then he'd say, oh, I don't want to take another lap. Every time you open your mouth, it's another lap, right? Sit on the bench. Hey, you can run, you take a lap, you can start running home if you want. But this is how it is. And everybody's watching that. Right, Brooke?
Right.
Everybody's watching how I'm handling the superstar. And that's what terms of managing, I don't want to go off on this tangent, but that's what happened with the Browns and Deshaun Watson. Who's managing this show? It's pathetic. So even coach of the year twice doesn't know how to manage that situation. What does that tell you? It tells you this is not easy. If you're going to go get an MBA and you haven't taken managing courses, public speaking, sales, you just wasted your money. Those are the reading, writing, arithmetics of running a business, running your portfolio in real estate. Back to you, Brooke.
Yeah, no, it's I don't know. I always, for some reason, there's certain movies that I like to watch whenever I need a little inspiration or motivation, to manage something at work. I think, The Godfather is one. Moneyball, I love the way, he kind of, he learns throughout that whole process. But yeah, and now with a young kid at home, it's I think what I'm kind of bracing myself for is that it's one thing to say, like right now, when he's not walking and he's not able to have a conversation, like the type of parent I want to be. But at least my wife and I can start to formulate what are the things that are important to us, and how we want to raise our family. So yeah.
And you got to talk about it. You got to talk about it because I know we're sliding into parenting. Parenting is just another form of managing. Being married, it's another form of managing. When we say managing, a lot of times, it's not necessarily top down. You're managing yourself, you're managing your relationship. It's not like your wife works for you. Now, obviously, I'm the boss. People work for me. I write the check. I can fire them, but I don't want to fire them. I want to develop them. I really want them to be more partners. So for me to partner up with somebody, like you, Amari, or we were talking to our new guy, Amir, Travis and I were talking to him. Listen, it's got to be a win-win with your sub, with your, for your plumber, for your real estate, with your people that are working with you, either part-time or full-time, your wife, your husband, your kids. You can't, on the one hand, you can't tell people what to do, but on the other hand, you have to tell people what you do. I mean, am I making sense, Amari?
No, absolutely. And, not to contradict my earlier point, but, it's like I stopped thinking about this and just started changing the way, just over time, how I manage people and talk with people, getting rid of the over explaining. But, sometimes I wish I could impart with people. It's like, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help make your life easier. That's the concept of this partnership, whether it's call me, with an update or send me this or do this. It's like, you don't want to get screamed at by the boss later. You don't want to get, like the schedule messed up or this and that. You want to, make more money with less stress. It's like, these are the things that are in place for that to happen. This isn't, rocket science. This is to help you. But
Right.
you don't get into that. You don't go there. But
I think sometimes you may have to stray into that. I'm thinking of some of the guys that we've really developed. Again, one couple of our subs, one sub in particular, I'm thinking, I mean, we had to sit down and talk to him. He had great work ethic, showed up, was a real hustler, but he had some bad habits. And so everything I was framing about doing your clipboard, doing this, doing that, getting organized, following your script. If you're going to go to lunch, we need to know when you're going and where you're going. Is it on site? Is it off site? Whatever. And then, there was a little bit of arguing. Oh, why do you want to know where I'm going for lunch? You know what? Because I'm telling him to. All right. I said, do you want to be successful in what you're doing? Hey, look at my business. All right. Look at the success we have. If you think that just happens by accident, so there's got to be some credibility here on it so that you can, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of time and explain to you, but that's it. I think you got the talent. You're doing that Mary Kay managing, a lot of praise, but the criticism is that piece of meat between the two pieces of bread, the praise, which is you got to do it this way. That's not up for discussion. Now, you're not being a dick. You're just getting to the point. Not wasting anybody's time. Back to you, Amari.
Yeah. That's something I think with some of our, our foremen, senior managers, that's one thing we're constantly talking about, and when we get complaints about, the similar thing of, oh, it's just these guys aren't good, these guys aren't capable. It's like, well, are you holding up your end of the bargain? Because it's a two-way street. If you're not abiding by these principles, these things that we're talking about, the not over explaining, the, do what I'm telling you to do, like the step by step we're laying out, then, of course you're going to run into issues. And unfortunately that bleeds into, other areas that bleeds into the employees that might work with them, that they don't even work on the same crew. It just becomes like this disease of where, oh, I can talk back to this person and we can have a back and forth about this because, I just had it with this guy or this guy and it's just this manager. So the more you can put a stop to that, the opposite goes in place where it's like another guy, like another crew. And it's like, okay, this is the stuff that I'm abiding by because I already know what the drill is.
They have to have credibility. I mean, I'm thinking of, last year, one of our absolute top guys, Dave, he absolutely up there with one of the top guys. We got some new subs coming in. He's over at this one job and he's just assuming. Remember the word assume makes an ass out of you and me. He's assuming these guys are going to clean up. And then not to make it worse, he's asking them, did you guys clean? Oh yeah, we cleaned up. Well, they didn't clean up because they didn't even know how to spell the word clean up, let alone do it. And of course the customer's like, he's used our company for years doing different stuff. He's shocked at the mess that was left. He says, man, God, I didn't think I had to be the foreman here, customer being the foreman, and tell you guys to clean up. He had a legitimate complaint. And the mistake was we made an assumption these crews could work on their own without getting babysat. And that gets to when you delegate. You're delegating to a point. You got the guardrails out. You're going to check the work and you're going to tell them you're going to check the work. All right? You're not getting paid until I check this work. And I'm going to make sure you know how to clean up. And then you quickly find out you got the training wheels on some new hire. Are they coming in on time? Are they dressed right? Are they listening? Are they just making, noise? I mean, all of these check boxes you're doing in your head before you're going to let them do some work on yourself by themselves. Okay. But on the other hand, you don't want to stand over them, nagging them, like some frantic mom with a 10-year-old. I'm not saying mom, but dads do it too. The weak dads do it. Is you're watching them. Hey, you didn't do it right. This is how you do it.
Right.
Back to you, Brooke.
Hey, let's stop here. We got to pay some bills. 30 seconds, and we'll be back.
If you enjoy listening to our Small Business Confidential podcast, we're sure you'll enjoy our first podcast, The Cleveland Real Estate Investor. We give outside investors an inside look into the real estate market in Cleveland. Cleveland has been on the rise, and investors from all over see those cheap prices and salivate. Our job is to educate those investors and steer them in the right direction with several years of experience of how to do it right and many examples of how to do it wrong. Find the Cleveland Real Estate Investor podcast on any app you listen to your podcast today.
Yeah, I think part of being a good manager is giving simple, direct assignments and feedback. I think the more you kind of over explain, the less effective it is. I think one kind of area that we at least is important to manage is, it's important, to manage who you have working for you, but also in a way like manage your manager and to manage your boss's, expectations, making sure that, obviously the language is going to be a little bit different, but I think all of us are in a situation where we have people, reporting to us. I always feel the most confident of someone when they're like managing their assignments that they have going on with me and they're keeping me updated, not the other way around.
Right.
So I think anyone out there, who's listening, that's just as important to consider than, the people that you've got underneath you.
Yeah, managing the manager is something that is a hard concept for people to understand who are working for somebody, because that's kind of a variation of what happens in say college or high school, especially college, where you just think you're getting so passive when you're in college that it's all based on grades and performance. It's not you actually challenging your professor. Are you challenging your boss? How do you know you're not wasting your time if you're in a college classroom? How do you know that person that you're working for, they may be an idiot, right? You may have an idiot boss. You may have a dysfunctional company. Do you know that? Have you thought about it? Have you had a conversation with somebody? Because if you're working for a really good company, a good organization, they're challenging you. They're not beating you down. You go to work and you want to go to work. That's a good company. And when you bring up ideas, boss is interested in hearing them. Now, he may not accept it, but at least he's encouraging you to think for yourself. That's why, when I think about these situations, these toxic workplaces, a sexual harassment. I mean, Brooke, your older sister, my daughter, I'll tell you one thing. I always raised her with the idea, like, I don't want you taking shit from anybody. I don't want you to have an abusive boyfriend or husband. And I certainly don't want you to be in an abusive work environment. I mean, so if you got a guy like, some of these TV personalities, you got to ask yourself, like say Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, Puff Diddy, all these people, where are the parents? How come these kids, these girls, I mean, I would expect that my daughter would be on the phone if somebody tried to harass her, right? I'm going to let you answer this, Brooke. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, knowing her, yeah.
That's how she was raised. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, in other situations, there might be a lot of people might be scared to do that. But knowing her, I know that she would A, definitely probably try to fight back, and B, she would talk to you, talk to her husband, talk to me. So.
Yeah, and we would pick up the O.J. Simpson murder, Nicole Simpson. Her dad knew he was beating her up and did nothing. I think, tying this back to managing the manager is you want your people that you're managing to feel connected to you. And Amara, you hear this all the time. We tell them if they're stuck, if they don't understand what they're doing, if they feel like they're going off the road, what do we tell them they're supposed to do?
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. Pick up the phone. Text. I'm stuck. Don't be afraid to just raise your hand, right?
Yeah. To what you were just saying too about, all of those different cases, it's like there has to be, relating it back to managing, there has to be empowerment. It's not just I'm the manager, do what I say. I mean, that's there, but it's also, that's the first layer. And then the next layer above that, which is connected to the do what I say is, I need you to raise your hand. I need you to let me know if you're at a job and it's going long. I don't want to find out the next day that you couldn't get to this other thing that was important, because you were running long at a job or there was an issue. It's just, and also, respectful pushback. If something's not going to work or there's a better way to go about it, we're brainstorming now. Now we're working together, and that's positive energy, for everyone involved, instead of just, the complete opposite, oh man, whatever, this guy's just on me again, or oh, we're talking about this again.
Well, you know what? And that's the other thing you have to absolutely have in your managerial toolbox. Whether you're managing the manager, you're managing people, you have got to be prepared to be confrontational. And most people just run away from that. Oh, I just can't, somebody will say, hey, I got an abusive boss. They just ignore it. They don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
You may have an employee who just keeps mouthing off. Nobody wants to tell them. They'll come to me to complain, right? They'll come to you to complain, but they don't want to do anything. You know what? And I'll go out and I'll tell them, just tell them to stop talking, right? Oh, I don't know. They don't listen. Just send them home.
Right.
Okay. But now I'm starting to realize I've got, more older, more experience, 50 years, doing this and stuff. I'm starting to realize how people are petrified over confronting a situation. That's probably what happens with the Matt Lauers, the Charlie Roses, think about this Epstein. Who is this guy?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeff Epstein?
Yeah.
Can you imagine if my daughter, they say, what are you taking my daughter to New Mexico for? What is this about? Or some of these kids that were abused by priests, altar boys. I mean, there is it's almost like a willful blindness sometimes where people just don't want to go there and ask those questions. And as a manager, as a parent, especially as a manager, you have to have horizontal vision. It's like being when you're a quarterback, you're Peyton Manning, you're doing, what did he do, Brooke? He said Colorado, Nebraska, whatever. Omaha, he's seeing this stuff because he's looking at the safety, he's looking at the linebacker edging up, he's looking around, he's seeing this, he's changing the play, he's in charge, he's prepared. And the last thing I want to explore is being prepared. And I'll tell a quick story, and then we'll go around the horn and we'll finish up on this note. Being prepared. I was telling, we went out to dinner last night. I was telling my wife a story about the young Bill Belichick, his dad was Steve Belichick, who was a top coach at the Naval Academy. So Bill grew up in high school, going with his dad to work, watching game film, college games, breaking it down. His dad would give him assignments, break down the opposing team. But Bill Belichick grew up with his dad, Steve Belichick, top coach at the Naval Academy. I don't think he was the head coach, but offensive coordinator, whatever, co-coach. So he'd break down game films. Okay, so he's doing that for 4 or 5 years, 6 years. He graduates from college. His first pro job is with the Baltimore Colts, before they moved. This is like late 70s. And Ted Marchibroda was the head coach, gave him his first job as a favor to Steve Belichick, his dad. Took this kid on, go for this, get the footballs. But then he said, once you break down, I got this film coming up. One of my coaches is sick. Can you break down this film? 2 days later, Bill Belichick gives Coach Marchibroda the breakdown on the film, and it is staggering how good it is. Unbelievable how good it is. And he's like, wow, we've got a boy genius here. And so he started breaking down films. And the next step was he told this 22, 23-year-old Bill Belichick, never played pro football, to go out and talk to the defense and talk to them what you're seeing. He would come up to these different players and say, you're going up against this guard, this offensive tackle. This is what their tendencies are, stuff like that. And it quickly became apparent to these NFL pro players that this kid knew what he was talking about. He was prepared. If you're prepared as a manager, you're working twice as hard as the people you're employing. Okay. You are prepared. You've done your clipboard. You have your script. You have your whole plan for the day laid out. You have instant credibility. These pro players at first were like, who is this kid? Doesn't even shave, right? Never played pro football. What does he know? Well, after they played that game, they realized this guy's going to help me play better and make more money. So they're hanging on every word this kid's saying. So let's talk about being prepared, Brooke. Scripting, clipboard.
Yeah, I mean, it's, setting the tone, being a good example, and you almost need to know where, if you're a manager, you need to know the ins and outs of, in my opinion, you need to know what everyone is doing, what the, where are the pitfalls, what problems could come up. And then when you're meeting about it, just trust your gut. If you think something, it doesn't smell right, if something doesn't look right, then you're probably right. And, you should say something about it. But, I think it varies, but 15 to 20 minutes at the end of each day, you're organizing stuff, whether it's on a spreadsheet or a notepad, crossing things off, copying and pasting, making it, easy to read and understand. And if you do that, I mean, I'm not saying your job's going to be easier, but it will be. I would guess you probably feel a little less anxious and a little less like hectic because you can visualize what your assignments are and what you have to do and what other people are responsible for doing.
Well, I want to add one thought to that. If you're prepared, if you know what everybody's script is, you're giving those scripts out, and it fails, you will know where and why it fails. Were they listening? Did they forget? Amari, did you start here when you should have started there? It failed because they weren't reading it.
Right.
Okay. So that's where you bore into that on your education, where you're telling them, no, you didn't read what I said. Okay. And next time I give you a script, I want you to repeat it back to me. In fact, I'm going to put the training wheels on you. I'm going to make sure you check in. And that's where, having that detailed script when you can break down, there's something you're doing wrong as a manager if you're not addressing the failure of where it's happening. Go ahead, Amari. Final thought. We'll wrap this up.
Final thought would be, especially in terms of scripting, preparedness, delegating, everything, is anticipating incompetence. You don't hope for it, you don't wish for it, you don't prefer it, but understanding that people are people and, they might have understood only half of what you said, or maybe just 90% of what you said. And just keeping that in mind. And that's why you have certain checkpoints of managing when you delegate. So you're not caught off guard, at the end of the day or even the next day, or God forbid, even further down the line when something wasn't done the right way or wasn't done at all. You anticipate those things and,
right.
Create a system in place that you're checking for those. So there's a backstop for that, because it's going to happen. That's the nature of any business, any type of execution for anything.
Right. It's almost like you're waiting around the corner. It's like, okay, my 10-year-old, I told him to clean the room. Half the time he doesn't clean the room. This time I told him, clean the room or you don't go out. I know I've said this in past podcasts. I use this example. And I'm prepared. What's the over under that they're going to clean the room? What's the money line?
Right.
I'm just waiting there. I know, and they come down, it's not clean. Now it's a teaching moment. Didn't clean the room, you don't go out. Okay? It's like we were talking about with one of our foremen, assuming these new subs will clean up. Okay, no. I don't know if they can clean up. In fact, I'm going to stop in. I'm going to make sure I'm there at the end of the day and, check how they cleaned up. I'm going to anticipate that incompetence. So, or somebody, we deal with this all the time. People say, oh yeah, I know how to do drywall. No, you don't. Right. You don't know how to do drywall.
Those teaching moments are so crucial because however you handle that as a manager, you are either rewarding, shitty work, bad behavior, or you're providing it with the consequences, for it to be a teaching moment.
Yeah, and that's how you teach them. And the other thing is, the interesting thing is, we talk about teaching, but it's also filtering. Are these people somebody you want to invest your time in? Because if I told somebody, you don't know how to drywall, how are they going to react to that type of criticism?
Right.
They're going to want to learn how, or they're going to be in their own kind of delusional bubble.
Right.
You know, they're going to go home and tell their mom or their girlfriend or whatever, hey, man, the guy's a dick. You know, he doesn't know shit. Here I am. I'm constantly borrowing money from my girlfriend, my mom, you know, just a mama's boy, whatever. And he's going around like he's God's gift to contracting, right? You know, and you saw that early on as a young kid when you're working these hiring sessions where these people were delusional, right?
Mhm.
Feeding my I got to feed my babies. And then the next day they would show up for work. Well, as we said, Amari, I guess these babies are starving now, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, listen, we'll end on that note. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, Brooke,
Sounds
Amari,
good.
have a good break. Talk to you later.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Small Business Confidential. To support, please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Also add our podcast to your favorite streaming services. Everything is appreciated, and we'll be back soon with another episode and upload schedule. The person voicing the intro's name is Travis Riley. Thank you, Travis. And the music was done by our engineer, me, Amari.